so.
We might. Okay, so you can do two kinds of cool quick primes here. Your number one's open, right? So you can actually just open this up and flood water right back into it and fill up your draft hose out of your tank. And then close your number one and pull your primer, and, it'll work. But what I want to try and do is pump it and then hot transition while, we'll be recirculating water back in the tank. But it's kind of like pumping a hose leg. So we'll do that out of the tank and then hot transition to this tank. So to do that, I'm just going to slowly open this, start to fill this up and let the bubbles and air kind of blow its way through the system, and then we'll close the number one.
Okay, so get water all the way up and then close the number one.
Exactly. And go. On your mark. Whenever you're ready. Circulate water first. Give me a discharge. Right, because otherwise nothing's moving. Okay, so we're pumping water back into the tank. And then go ahead and open this slowly. Okay, and watch what's going on. You see water flowing? Watch your gauge. And is there actually water in there? No. We're gonna fail at this, aren't we? It's trying to pull that water out, I think, or the air out. There it goes. Comes back up, the air's through the system. Now slowly close this. And you're closing your number one, and you're watching your pressure gauge. Let me check pressure. Okay, and you just hot transition without interrupting water flow. With a foot valve. You can shut her down. We're good. Okay, thoughts, comments, questions, concerns? Is this potentially useful? Hell yeah, when I was an edge captain, it's the only way I drafted. In fact, I actually knew people from back in the 80s who didn't, that was before we had electric primers, this is how people would draft. You had to have water left in your tank to be able to draft with. So you'll find old literature on engines that says make sure you leave a certain amount of water left in your tank for drafting purposes. In fact, they had reserve tanks just for drafting. So, yeah. It's useful and easy, and I think the most important thing is you can roll in with an engine and be pumping a hose lay, and then somebody behind you can set up a tank, or maybe you're close enough to a pond or a creek, and you can then plug into that, and you can transition to pumping out of that source without interrupting your water flow. And then you can refill your tank while you're doing that at the same time.
So I was going to say, isn't it like I think the simplest way it was put to me from Estes was like filling your tank while you're discharging water, like in your hose lay, like it's like the...
If that's the simplest way for you, that works.
Okay.
For me, it's really about, like, my pump does one thing. It pulls, or does two things. It pulls water in and it pushes water out. Mm-hmm. That's all it ever does. So I can pull it from one source or another, and I really only have two options, with something not in the truck or something in the truck. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to not in the truck, I have creeks and I have ponds and I have irrigation ditches and I have hydrants and I have stuff, right? Other fire engines, water tenders, etc. But all of those have a little bit of intricacies, but nonetheless, you're pulling it from one side or the other, and the ability to be able to swap from one to the next smoothly without interrupting your discharge is great. And the whole refill factor of it is nothing more than pumping a different hose lay at the same time.
Right.
Because it's really just another hose lay. It just goes into the truck, and there's no hose. It's all pipe. But, yeah. Now, here's the other thing. If you're sitting here platform pumping off of this water tank, off this Fola tank, and your bypass, your number 17 cooler is open, after a while, you start to overflow. and you're dripping water on the ground. You're not dripping, you're like flowing water on the ground. And you're making a mess out at this drop point or whatever that you're pumping off of. And the reason is that your bypass takes pressurized water from the discharge side and pumps it straight back into the tank through like a 1/4 inch or smaller, probably 3/16 hose. And just runs it straight back into the tank. So if you're not discharging anything out of your tank, you're just pumping off this and you're using your bypass, you're gonna fill your tank up and it's gonna overflow and make a mess. So there's a couple ways you can deal with that. You can close your bypass, but you do want cooling water, right? Bypasses are a really good automated way to keep us from overheating a pump. So if you're gonna do that, you can hook up a 3/4 inch line to your Clearwater 19 discharge and run it back in your tank. Okay, and just barely crack it because you don't need very much water to cool things. So that's one way to do it. It's fairly clean and easy, but you got this big wad of 3/4 inch hose sitting in here. You can build an apparatus out of a like small chunk of hard hose or something that just shoots it straight back in. Or you can do what we just did in reverse. And instead of pumping out of the tank, we switched from the tank on the truck to the tank out here, you just switch backwards the other way, where you open your number 1, and now you're getting water out of both sides, except that you're not, but that's a whole different function of physics. So you're getting potentially water out of either or both sides. And then you close your number 8, and you're no longer getting water out of your tank. It's even smoother to do that than it is to do this because you don't have air bubbles in that system. So it goes really quickly. Pump out of your tank until you're down 1/4, half a tank, and then you can switch back over to pumping out of your source.